All right, let's dive into one of the most powerful and fascinating political ideas in all of history, the mandate of heaven. This is the concept that basically ran imperial China for thousands of years. It gave emperors this unbelievable godlike power. But, and this is a huge but, it came with a very serious and sometimes deadly catch.
So it really all boils down to one huge question. How do you justify absolute power? I mean, how does one person get to have total, unquestionable control over millions of others? Where does that authority even come from? Well, in imperial China, they had an answer that was both brilliant and incredibly dangerous.
Okay, so to really get this, you've got to understand the emperor's role. And honestly, his title tells you pretty much everything you need to know. He was known as the Son of Heaven. And no, that was not just some fancy nickname. The emperor was seen as the actual, literal connection between our world, the mortal world, and the divine realm, heaven itself. This position gave him absolute power, not just over the land and its people, but over, well, everything. His word was law, simple as that, because he was heaven's chosen guy on earth.
But where did this incredible power really come from? I mean, what was the mechanism? What actually gave the Son of Heaven his authority? This is where we get to the core of it all, what you might call the sword of power. It was called the mandate of heaven. Now, the best way to think about it is like a divine permission slip, a cosmic stamp of approval. Heaven itself would grant a just and worthy person the right, the mandate to rule China. This is what made their rule legit. Without the mandate, you were just another guy with an army. With it, you were the one true emperor.
So far, this sounds like a pretty sweet gig for the emperor, right? You get absolute power backed by heaven itself. But here's the twist. That divine permission slip, it wasn't a blank check. Oh no, heaven had some very strict terms and conditions. And this right here is the perfect way to put it. The mandate of heaven was a double-edged sword. It's such a great metaphor because it captures the whole paradox of the thing. One edge gives you ultimate power, but the other edge, it could cut you down in an instant if you weren't careful.
So let's break that down. On one side of the sword, you have divine right, the absolute authority to rule, no questions asked. But on the other side, you had a non-negotiable divine duty. This was the emperor's sacred obligation to rule fairly, to be just, and to take care of his people. You simply could not have one without the other.
So what would happen if an emperor started slacking on his duties? If he failed to live up to his end of the bargain? How would anyone even know he'd broken that sacred contract with heaven? Well, the answer was pretty simple. Heaven would start sending messages. You see, heaven was not a silent partner in this deal. If a ruler became corrupt or incompetent or just plain cruel, heaven would make its displeasure known to everybody. It would literally pull its support, and it sent out these very clear, very public signals that the emperor was no longer worthy to sit on the throne. And what were these signals? Well, they came in two main flavors. First, just bad government. If corruption was out of control and the people were suffering under a terrible regime, that was a clear sign the emperor had betrayed the mandate. But the second one, and this is the big one, was natural disasters. We're talking devastating floods, widespread famines, horrible earthquakes. These weren't seen as random acts of nature. Nope. They were interpreted as direct messages from heaven, showing its anger with the guy on the throne. And this is probably the most radical part of the entire concept. It's like a built-in political pressure valve. If the signs were clear, if the government was corrupt, and the lands were being torn apart by disasters, then rising up and overthrowing the emperor was not a crime. It wasn't treason. It was seen as the necessary and even just thing to do. Rebellion basically became a moral duty to get things back on track with heaven.
This incredibly powerful idea that a ruler could actually lose the right to rule created this really predictable pattern throughout Chinese history. It's something we now call the dynastic cycle. It pretty much worked like this. A new leader, usually a successful rebel, takes over and says, "Hey, guess what? I have the mandate of heaven now." And for a while, maybe a few generations, his dynasty rules well. There's peace, people are happy, but then, over time, corruption starts to creep in. Rulers get lazy and unjust. And then the signs start to appear. The famines, the floods, that's the signal from heaven. A new rebellion rises up, the old dynasty is kicked out, and the whole cycle starts all over again with a new family claiming the mandate.
And we're not talking about some brief moment in history here. This cycle, a dynasty rising, prospering, decaying, and then being overthrown, all justified by the mandate of heaven, was the fundamental rhythm of Chinese politics for more than 2,000 years. It's this incredible idea that, weirdly enough, created both stability and a permanent blueprint for revolution.
So in the end, the mandate of heaven really meant a ruler's right to be in charge was tied to their performance, not just their family name, which leaves us with a fascinating thought, right? Back then, the signs of a failed ruler were floods and famines. In our modern world, what are the signs that show a leader has lost the support of the people, that they've lost their own kind of mandate?